Jonah's starship shuddered violently, throwing him against the control panel with a graceless thump that could have earned him a medal in the Interstellar Slapstick League. "Note to self," he muttered, as a blinking red light mocked him, "never trust a navigation system designed by engineers who think gravity is optional." He rolled his eyes at the digital readout, which cheerfully suggested he was 3 light-years off course, and possibly entering the territory of planets that had been uninhabited since the Great Cosmic Snail Migration. That sounded peaceful enough, but in Jonah's experience, the universe had a sense of humor worse than his mother-in-law's holiday jokes. The console pinged again, insisting he activate the emergency thrusters, but he ignored it, reasoning that pressing random buttons often led to the most interesting stories, or at least the best stories for blackmail material later. Outside the viewport, the planet glimmered like a carnival wrapped in crystalline fog. Rivers of liquid light meandered through valleys that hummed with what sounded suspiciously like faint jazz music. Jonah squinted, certain that at some point he had signed a contract that specifically forbade planets that doubled as art installations. His foot slipped on a control pedal, sending the ship into a wobble that could only be described as the celestial equivalent of a hiccup, and he spilled a mug of synth coffee over the dashboard. "Great," he groaned. "Nothing says galactic hero like caffeinated sparks and a slowly melting cockpit." By the time he stumbled out of the ship, dusting off glowing particles that stuck like sentient lint, the sun, or whatever stellar body counted as a sun here, was painting the crystal trees in a color he didn't have a name for, hovering somewhere between neon peach and regret. As he stepped forward, he immediately tripped over a rock shaped suspiciously like a 3-eyed frog performing interpretive dance, landing with a graceless sprawl into a puddle of luminescent liquid that tickled his skin with electric tingles. Jonah coughed, sputtering, and mumbled something about the Intergalactic Safety Council needing stricter guidelines on puddle hazards. And then he saw her. She appeared at the crest of a small hill, her armor catching every stray glimmer of the chaotic light around them. It shifted subtly with her movements, refracting the rainbowed hues of the planet like liquid metal that had a particularly snarky personality. She was tall and elegant, her posture impossible to imitate even if Jonah had been practicing for decades in a zero-gravity ballet class. Her ears were long and tapering backward, catching stray flashes of light and giving her an almost mythical presence. She tilted her head, one long ear brushing a shoulder plate with a soft metallic squeak, and raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow at him, an expression that seemed to say, "I am both amused and mildly disappointed in your life choices." Jonah scrambled to his feet, brushing neon sludge off his pants and trying desperately to look like a competent human being, which he quickly realized was impossible when facing someone who could effortlessly blend elegance and intimidation into a single movement. He opened his mouth, intending to say something witty about puddles and fashion choices in alien environments, but nothing came out except a strangled, hello. She stepped closer, and Jonah's brain immediately registered the subtle shift of her armor panels as if they were breathing, moving in tandem with her emotions. It wasn't threatening, exactly, but it was unsettling in the way that perfect timing always is when someone catches you in the middle of a very human mistake. "Are you curious about what's under this armor?" she asked, her voice a smooth, resonant melody that made the word armor feel simultaneously serious and like a punchline to a joke he didn't understand. Jonah blinked. He thought about answering something safe, like, "Probably more alien than I can handle," but honesty had a way of sneaking past his brain when confronted with something astonishing. He found himself blurting, "I think you're built for more than just walking around looking intimidating. There's elegance, strength, and, well, something almost musical in how it moves." Her eyes widened, a violet-silver shimmer that made the ambient light seem timid by comparison. She froze mid-step, one long ear twitching involuntarily as she processed the words. Jonah's stomach lurched, realizing he might have just committed some form of cosmic faux pas, perhaps the intergalactic equivalent of wearing socks with sandals to a royal summit. He tried to recover, because he was Jonah, and recovery was something he believed in even if the universe did not. He said, scratching the back of his neck in a gesture that might have been meant to convey casualness but probably read as nervous contortionist. "I mean, not in a weird way. Just like art." Or, he flailed, reaching for metaphors that would land somewhere near the planet's gravity, but instead they floated off like lost drones. Or like armor that wants to be appreciated for its armoriness. He winced. For a long moment, she simply stared, her armor tilting slightly as if adjusting its stance to match the tension in the air. Jonah's internal monologue screamed that he should probably apologize, back away slowly, and maybe invent a plausible story about being chased here by a sentient cosmic sandwich. But he didn't. He couldn't. There was something in her gaze, something that softened the rigidity of metal and mystery, something that made his ridiculous honesty seem less like a mistake and more like an oddly calibrated signal reaching across species boundaries. Then she blinked, and not just a normal blink, but a blink that felt like a slow clap of comprehension. Jonah's heart sank slightly had he overstepped. But instead of anger or offense, her lips curved just barely, teasingly, as if she were amused by the ridiculousness of human unpredictability. Jonah, for all his missteps, found himself smiling in return, even though he had no idea whether he was smiling in triumph or sheer terror. "So," she said finally, her tone equal parts curiosity and challenge, "you actually mean that?" Jonah swallowed, realizing he had absolutely no choice but to answer honestly again, because apparently honesty was now the cosmic rule on this planet. "Yeah," he said, shrugging in a way that felt like confessing to an entire galaxy. "I mean, it's impressive, and beautiful, and yes, I think it moves almost like music." Another pause. Her armor shifted again, panels sliding with a subtle hiss that might have been laughter. "Curious," she murmured, almost to herself, and then added, "You are unlike other humans I've encountered." Jonah coughed, choking on his own astonishment, because unlike humans, he had always assumed being awkward, sarcastic, and clumsy was basically humanity's universal calling card. I'll take that as a compliment." Her long ears twitched once more, and she tilted her head in a way that made Jonah's stomach drop and lift at the same time. The planet's strange music, the glowing trees, the rivers that hummed electric violins, they all seemed to pause for a beat, as if the universe itself was leaning in to listen. Jonah, feeling both absurd and remarkably alive, realized that the encounter had just shifted from something potentially deadly to something exhilaratingly unpredictable. And as he looked at her, armor glinting, long ears brushing the air, eyes that seemed to hold galaxies, he understood that curiosity, honesty, and a well-timed awkward joke might just be enough to bridge worlds. He smiled, tripping slightly on a glowing root, and muttered, "So, do I get a tour, or are we going to stare at each other like interstellar statues all day?" Her laugh, soft and melodic, carried across the neon-lit valley, bouncing off crystal trees and rivers alike, and Jonah knew that this was going to be a story worth remembering, even if it started with puddles, embarrassment, and a perfectly honest human answer. Jonah had barely stopped tripping over the neon-glowing roots when Lysura, her armor reflecting the erratic light of the luminescent forest, decided it was time to move. She floated down the slope with a grace that made gravity seem like a polite suggestion, rather than a law, each step punctuated by soft, mechanical clicks as her armor subtly shifted. Jonah followed, wobbling like a gravity-defying toddler, swiping at floating spores that hovered like tiny, judgmental lanterns. "Note to self," he muttered, "never underestimate alien pollen. It's either mildly hallucinogenic or actively plotting against me." Lysura glanced at him, one long ear flicking impatiently, and tilted her head in that same subtle mixture of curiosity and amusement that had kept Jonah's knees from fully giving out. "You do realize," she said, her voice calm but threaded with teasing, "that the forest rearranges itself when it senses indecision." "Indecision is my specialty," Jonah replied, dodging a shifting crystalline branch that had grown overnight to block the path. "I'm basically a master of wrong turns and awkward timing." He stumbled over a small boulder that had popped up in the middle of the trail like it was auditioning for some cosmic slapstick routine. "Seriously," he added, dusting off imaginary confetti, "you could hire me to teach interstellar clumsiness." Lysura's armor clicked again, but this time it wasn't the sound of movement. It was the subtle creak of amusement. "You are unlike most humans," she said, not unkindly. Jonah grinned, flinging a hand toward the humming river to demonstrate a dramatic slide. Thank you," he said. "I aim to defy expectations on a galactic scale." The forest opened into a valley, and Jonah paused to gape at a waterfall of liquid crystal, cascading into a pool that refracted the light into impossible rainbows. "Remind me again," he said, "why did I choose planetary exploration instead of interpretive dance?" The waterfall twinkled, almost as if it were considering answering, and Jonah immediately suspected he might be losing his mind or gaining a very sarcastic consciousness in the local flora. Lysura, however, simply raised a gloved hand and gestured for him to follow. As they walked, Jonah tried to match her pace, which was a futile endeavor. Her armor made no unnecessary noise, panels shifting with a soft precision that suggested the machinery was as intelligent as its wearer. Jonah, on the other hand, made the occasional oof or eep when stepping over the smallest anomaly. Lysura glanced over her shoulder, her long ears flicking in perfect synchronization, and said, "If you keep that up, the local fauna might assume you are part of the ecosystem and ingest you." Jonah chuckled nervously. "I've always wanted to be environmentally sustainable, just not like that." He poked a hovering, gelatinous creature that emitted a polite squeak and floated away. "See, I'm being helpful." They continued, and Jonah noticed subtle changes in Lysura's armor. Faint luminescent lines tracing along her limbs, pulsing in gentle rhythm. He tried to comment, but every word he attempted sounded like a poorly rehearsed poetry recital. Your armor is kind of moodse," he stammered. Lysura's eyes glimmered violet silver, one ear twitching in amusement. "It responds to emotion. Yours, in particular, is erratic." She gestured to his chest, where the suit's lights briefly flickered in response to his racing heartbeat. Jonah, ever the self-deprecating human, muttered, "Erratic is my middle name. Actually, it's Norman, but let's pretend it's erratic." The path narrowed as they approached a ridge, and the wind carried a sharp tang of ozone and the faint smell of something that could either be alien spices or baked regrets. Jonah held onto a low-hanging crystal branch to steady himself and looked down at the valley. "I don't suppose anyone left a user manual for this place?" he asked, half to himself. Lysura paused and looked at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips beneath the visor of her armor. "Curiosity is your manual," she said. "But some lessons are learned the hard way." Jonah grinned, pretending to take notes on a non-existent data pad. "Duly noted. Lesson 1, don't confuse self-preservation with enthusiasm. Lesson 2, if you trip over alien plants, make it look intentional." He tripped on the edge of a crystal outcrop anyway and fell into a patch of phosphorescent moss, sending sparks of light scattering like a miniature galaxy. Lysura's hand shot out instinctively, catching him by the arm, and Jonah couldn't help but notice how effortlessly her strength complemented her elegance. He felt a flicker of admiration and a surge of embarrassment. "Careful," she said, releasing him after ensuring he wouldn't faceplant into another glowing puddle. "The moss here isn't lethal, usually, but it is persistent." Jonah got up, brushing off glowing spores, and quipped, "Persistent is good. I respect persistence. I respect anything that doesn't try to eat me, mostly." Lysura's ears twitched in amusement, and she gestured for him to follow. "You are entertainingly naive," she said, "though your honesty is surprisingly refreshing." As they descended into a low valley, Jonah noticed the occasional glimmer of movement in the crystal trees. Small creatures that looked like floating geometric puzzles with a propensity for mischief. One zipped past his face, prompting an instinctive dodge that nearly sent him rolling into a stream of humming light. "Okay," he gasped. Note to self, geometric puzzles are faster than expected, and I hate math. Lysura laughed softly, a sound that made the armor panels shimmer like starlight on water. "You adapt in strange ways," she said. "Most humans would panic, scream, or attempt unhelpful heroics. She paused, ear flicking as she considered him. "You improvise." Jonah felt a swell of pride, despite the fact that he was still sticky with phosphorescent moss, and probably smelled faintly of electric ozone. "Improvise is my specialty, and disaster is my constant companion." He held out a hand as if presenting himself formally to the valley. "Jonah, Interstellar Disaster Coordinator, at your service." Lysura studied him for a moment, and then, quite unexpectedly, she laughed outright, the sound musical and warm, bouncing across the crystalline surfaces. Jonah blinked. "Okay," he said, scratching his head. "I did not expect laughter. I expected either disintegration or judgmental telepathy. This is better. She tilted her head, her long ears flicking with subtle rhythm. Your responses are peculiar, she said. Yet, you do not fear me in the usual ways. That is interesting. Jonah shrugged, floating slightly as he stepped over another shifting route. Fear is overrated, he said. Besides, if I panicked, we'd both probably end up in a puddle of my own doing. I try to avoid multitasking disasters. They walked on in companionable silence for a while, Jonah occasionally tripping and Lysura occasionally teasing, until they reached a clearing dominated by a massive crystalline monolith that pulsed with light like it had a heartbeat. Jonah approached it cautiously, half expecting it to explode, half expecting it to start reciting poetry. Do I touch it? He asked. Lysura's eyes flickered, and she lifted a gauntleted hand. Touch, she said simply. The monolith reacts to intent. It knows your mind before your body does. Be honest. Jonah froze, glancing at her. Honest? He scratched his neck. I'm usually honest about, well, mostly about not being heroic, tripping over everything, and occasionally ruining perfectly good planets with awkward enthusiasm. Does that count? Lysura's lips curved into a smile beneath the armor, and she tilted her head in a way that made the long ears seem almost expressive. It is sufficient, she said. Approach. Jonah stepped forward carefully and touched the monolith. Immediately, the crystal surface shimmered, projecting images that danced like holographic confetti, maps of distant galaxies, impossible creatures, and moments of cosmic history that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He gawked, trying to make sense of it, while Lysura watched with an unreadable expression, her long ears twitching now and then in subtle amusement. Jonah whispered, half to himself, well, that's impressive, also terrifying. And I think it just judged me for all my past life choices. Lysura's laugh echoed again, soft and melodic. The universe has a sense of humor, she said, and it finds you amusing. Jonah looked at her, still processing the swirling visions of the monolith. For the first time since landing, he felt capable. Not fearless, not perfect, but capable. And somehow, that honesty, his clumsy, awkward honesty, had opened a door he never expected to find. As the light of the monolith bathed them in colors that had no names, Jonah realized that the adventure had only just begun, and that navigating it with Lysura, with her teasing, her unexpected warmth, and her enigmatic armor, would require every ounce of improvisation he could muster. And perhaps, just perhaps, a sense of humor. Jonah and Lysura moved cautiously through a narrow canyon where the air shimmered like heated glass. The walls pulsed faintly, resonating with a hum that seemed almost sentient, and Jonah, as usual, couldn't help commenting. Okay, either this canyon is alive, or I just drank too much of that neon coffee. And I think I drank a lot. Lysura's long ears twitched at the edge of her visor, a subtle sign of amusement, and she tilted her head. You find humor in the improbable, she said, her voice laced with that melodic calm that made him simultaneously confident and embarrassed about his own existence. It is unusual. Unusual is my brand, Jonah said, balancing on a rock that had somehow grown sentient overnight, giving him a playful shove toward the canyon floor. He stumbled, flailed, and caught himself just in time, giving an exaggerated bow to Lysura. Thank you for not letting me become canyon salad. Lysura's armor shifted, soft luminescent lines tracing along her arms, a visual echo of a smile she did not fully display. Do not make canyon salad a metaphor for our journey, she said dryly, but the twitch of her long ears betrayed her amusement. They continued deeper into the canyon, drawn toward a faint glow at its end. The glow was not of the kind produced by bioluminescent flora or erratic minerals. It pulsed with purpose, radiating warmth and intensity, a heartbeat of the planet itself, if the planet had a very dramatic sense of theatrics. Jonah peeked around a crystalline protrusion and immediately regretted it. A creature, massive, ten-eyed, four-limbed, and astonishingly fond of interpretive dance, was performing a slow, hypnotic sway. Its limbs moved in ways that made gravity itself look casual, and every eye tracked Jonah like he was the main character in a very bad interstellar puppet show. Oh no, Jonah whispered, glancing at Lysura. I did not sign up for interpretive eye stalking, not in my contract. Lysura's long ears twitched and she crouched slightly. It is a sentinel, she said calmly. It reacts to intent and emotional clarity. We must proceed with honesty and caution. Jonah nodded solemnly, though the word caution for him always came with an asterisk. May include tripping, accidental heroics, and excessive flailing. He crept forward, knees shaking, palms sweaty, and hands occasionally smacking walls. The sentinel's eyes followed every move, and Jonah muttered, "I hope it likes humans, or at least awkward humans. We have charm in very small doses." The sentinel swayed closer, its movements almost rhythmic, and Jonah realized that humor, in the face of cosmic danger, might just be his secret weapon. "So, do you like interstellar pancakes? Or, interpretive coffee? I have a lot of both." He made a small bow that nearly ended in a faceplint. Lysura, arms crossed, one long ear flicking, watched him with patient amusement. The sentinel paused. A low rumble emanated from its body, like a laugh or perhaps an incredulous sigh. Jonah froze. Did it just? "Yes," Lysura said softly. "It acknowledges honesty. Your humor disarms it. Continue." With renewed, ridiculous courage, Jonah inched forward, narrating each step like an absurdly heroic guidebook narrator. Step 1, avoid eye contact. Step 2, pretend gravity is optional. Step 3, definitely do not trip. Step 4, who am I kidding, probably trip. He stumbled, but managed to regain balance. The sentinel's movement slowed, its 10 eyes blinking in what Jonah interpreted as approval. When they finally passed the sentinel, the glow intensified into a vast chamber dominated by a crystalline pool. The light reflected off the liquid surface, showing shifting patterns that seemed almost like memories. Lysura stopped at the edge, one hand resting on a nearby crystal spire. "This is the heart of the planet," she said. "It reflects truth. It responds to emotion, intent, and honesty. We are here to witness ourselves." Jonah peered into the pool, and the patterns swirled, showing fragmented visions of his own past, moments of clumsiness, failed missions, and impulsive honesty. He winced at each scene, but then something shifted. The images began to intertwine with glimpses of Lysura, her long ears flicking in thought, her armor panels glowing with emotion, subtle expressions beneath the visor. Somehow, their stories meshed, human blunders alongside alien precision. The absurdity of his existence fit perfectly with her meticulous grace. I don't understand it," Jonah said quietly. "It's showing everything, and somehow it makes sense." Lysura tilted her head. "Truth," she said simply, "can be illuminating, even when it is chaotic." She lifted her gauntleted hand, touching the surface. Light rippled outward, and for the first time Jonah noticed the subtle patterns beneath her armor. Bioluminescent lines, delicate and intricate, shifting with her pulse. He blinked, a mix of awe and curiosity gripping him. I didn't expect," he trailed off, realizing that for once his words failed him. "Do not be afraid," she said, her voice softening. "It is part of me, and you have seen it with honesty." Jonah swallowed, trying to process. "Honestly?" he asked. "Even the weird, confusing, can't-explain-it parts." Lysura's long ears flicked, a small gesture of approval. "Especially those parts. You understand in ways other humans do not." He felt a warmth spread through his chest, a combination of relief, pride, and sheer absurdity. "Well," he said, scratching the back of his neck, "I'm not exactly known for subtlety or finesse, but apparently it works sometimes." He grinned, and Lysura's eyes shimmered with something almost like amusement, softening the intensity of the chamber. For hours they lingered, Jonah speaking in half-nervous, half-humorous observations, Lysura responding with subtle corrections, gentle teasing, and faint traces of laughter that made the armor shimmer like starlight. They shared stories of distant worlds, failures, misadventures, and improbable successes, bridging the gap between human unpredictability and alien elegance. Jonah realized that humor and honesty were as much tools for survival as armor or weapons. They were a way to connect across the impossible distances of species, experience, and perspective. Finally, as the light from the heart of the planet dimmed to a calm, steady pulse, Jonah looked at Lysura. "You know," he said, "I thought honesty would get me eaten, vaporized, or at least reprimanded by some cosmic authority. Turns out, it's kind of magical. Also, I'm really glad you didn't just zap me for tripping all over your forest." Lysura's laugh echoed softly, the armor shifting in delicate waves. "You are unpredictable," she said. "But you are genuine. That is rare. Jonah scratched his head. Genuine, yes, rare apparently. Also clumsy, sarcastic, and extremely lucky. Her long ears twitched in what might have been a grin. You have grown. Not in physical strength, but in perception. You see patterns in chaos, humor in danger, honesty in fear. That is remarkable. Jonah felt a strange swelling of pride, though he tried to hide it behind a joke. So basically, I'm now a certified interstellar philosopher/disaster survivor. Lysura inclined her head. Certified in ways that matter, perhaps in ways that endure. The chamber began to quiet, the heart of the planet pulsing gently, reflecting their forms in soft luminescence. Jonah looked at Lysura, then at his own reflection, and finally back at her. I guess we make a good team, he said. Lysura's eyes softened, the long ears flicking like a gentle acknowledgement. Perhaps more than a team. A connection. Jonah blinked. Connection, huh? I like that. It sounds less terrifying than sentinel target. They laughed together, the sound mingling with the soft hum of the crystalline chamber, carrying across the glowing valley. For Jonah, the journey had started with clumsiness, uncertainty, and accidental honesty. Now he understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward, embrace absurdity, and speak the truth, even to someone from another world. Lysura extended a hand, long fingers glinting with soft bioluminescence. Jonah grasped it, and for the first time he felt entirely balanced, not just in body but in understanding. A human and an alien, humor and honesty interwoven, ready to face the universe together. As they emerged from the canyon, the sunset, or the planet's equivalent, bathed them in a cascade of impossible colors. Jonah felt a strange peace. The adventure had changed him, taught him that clumsiness could be courage, jokes could be strategy, and honesty could bridge galaxies. Lysura's long ears twitched gently in the breeze, and Jonah smiled. Whatever awaited them in the endless stars, he knew that he would face it differently now, with humor, honesty, and a heart ready for connection. And somewhere, deep in the glowing forest, a geometric puzzle creature paused to watch, blinking its 10 eyes in what Jonah optimistically interpreted as approval.